Destination Medicine is a joint project of the regional training hubs. This podcast series brings you medical students' accounts of their experience in applying to study medicine. Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Peter Letts. Lachlan MacMillan never imagined he'd become a doctor. After leaving school to work as a carpenter, his career took him across rural and remote Australia, from cattle stations and horseback tours to conservation work in the Kimberley. Along the way, a series of medical emergencies and rescue operations sparked an unexpected passion for healthcare. Now, studying medicine through the School of Rural Health in Dubbo, Lachlan reflects on his sister as a key mentor, family encouragement and life experiences that buoyed him enough to pursue a career he once thought was out of reach. Lockie begins by telling Nicole Goodman how an apprentice carpenter ended up pursuing a career in medicine.
So it's a bit of a winding path for me. So I was born and raised Toowoomba. Thought a little bit about being a doctor at school, but I was not great at school. So I quickly threw that one away. And I ended up leaving school as a carpenter, as an apprentice builder, which saw me do a bit of work in Toowoomba and eventually move out to the Queensland town of Roma. And I spent a bit of time on a cattle station out near the South Australian border. From there, I moved on to trick and stunt riding. So I worked for Australian Outback Spectacular, and where I did a little bit of first aid. We did see a few injuries, mainly of our own, and I was definitely one of those. And I got a little bit interested in medicine again, but it definitely wasn't forefront of my mind then. About 5 years after that, the winds changed a bit, and I actually picked up a job leading horseback tours at a big resort out near Lithgow onto the conservation team. And there's been a few big instances on the property, and we were quite remote. And as a result, the company decided to put myself and my team through a wilderness first responders course. So a much more, I suppose, in-depth pre-hospital sort of first aid training program. And I actually found I did quite well at that, and I very much enjoyed it, to my surprise. And it didn't feel like work at all. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the scenarios, and I really enjoyed the clinical side of it. And then eventually I found myself up in the Kimberley, up in northern Western Australia. At this time I was an environment manager up there, but I also did crisis management for the property as well. So bushfires, search and rescue, and of course medical sort of first aid response up there, as the only hospital in Kununurra is quite small and there weren't very many sort of emergency services persons around there. Once again, I was fortunate enough the company helped me through a diploma of emergency healthcare, which is sort of I suppose a step below being a paramedic. And once again, I found I really enjoyed it. We had quite a few very challenging responses up there. What really did stick is the fact that I was really enjoying medicine. I was really enjoying, the human element of it, to the extent that I actually started to volunteer with St John's Ambulance in the Indigenous community of Wyndham, working alongside the town's only paramedic at the time, who was just an amazing man who just taught me so much. When I eventually left there, I was considering coming back and doing paramedicine, but my sister eventually talked me into doing the Doctor of Medicine instead.
That is very much a winding road to medicine indeed, but it was family as well that also turned out to be an influence on your decision to study medicine. Tell us a bit more about that.
I'd come home for a little while. I was living back near Toowoomba at the time, and I'd spoken to my wife, she was my fiancée at the time, and my parents said that I was thinking about going back to uni to do paramedicine. And I can still remember the moment I was actually sitting on the couch with my mother and my sister, and I think we're watching that show Emergency Australia, and my sister just turned to me and she went, "You'd be a great doctor." And I sort of was like, "No, there's no chance. I'm not smart enough.
That's so sweet." No.
Yeah, I'm not cut out to be a doctor, but it got to the point where I kind of had to try. Now I had to know, otherwise I'd forever be thinking about what if I didn't take that chance.
You mentioned paramedicine and paramedics. Was there any other health profession that you would have considered had that not come to fruition?
I did consider, obviously, becoming a paramedic, but I very much wanted to sort of be on the front lines of medicine. So whilst I was up in the Kimberley, we did, as I mentioned, have a few quite challenging rescue and medical operations. One that really stood out for myself was a young girl who had fallen from a waterfall about 10 kilometres from the main station. Myself and the general manager at the time managed to get out there via a small helicopter and do what we could. She had suffered some quite severe head trauma, and we were very worried about sort of her future. Fortunately, I suppose the saving moments when we saw the paramedics end up floating overhead in the helicopter and coming to join us. But even then, they were quite concerned because there's very little we could do. But the really inspiring part about that story is she was a young lady who had a whole life ahead of her, and we were incredibly concerned for not only if she had survived, but how she would turn out from this. And fortunately, they managed to get her to the Kununurra Hospital, and there's a new young doctor who just started working there who was able to induce a coma and really sort of buy her some time for the RFDS to get her up to Darwin, and she had an amazing outcome. And in fact, she's back to work about 5 weeks later, which,
Wow.
Particularly in a rural area, it's such an amazing story. And you think that if one doctor wasn't there, the outcome could have been incredibly different.
Absolutely. I wonder, once you had allowed your sister's wonderful recommendation to do medicine settle, did you tell anyone else?
I kept it pretty close to home. I was still, particularly at the start, very unsure whether I would be able to do it at all. So I told my immediate family. Of course, I discussed it with my wife first, and I suppose the first step was, is it possible to actually make this work? And we worked out it was. So then I spoke to my sister, and she was overjoyed, and I had a full game plan in front of me within a few days. I also told my parents, and they were very excited, but I could tell they had their reservations about it. So when I did actually get in, they're pleasantly surprised.
Did you have a particular mentor who gave you guidance around your career once you were accepted outside of family, or was it them predominantly?
It was then predominantly, I think, very much leading up to it. Simon Turnbull, who was a paramedic up in northern Western Australia, was a really big role model for me in terms of what a health professional should look like. And then my sister was very much my manager and my biggest support when it came to GAMSAT applications and working through that process. And of course, my wife, having just graduated as being a vet, was, entering the world of health in a slightly different area as well. But up until that stage, I really didn't have a lot of sort of doctors or anyone that gave me that much mentoring. But obviously that's changed a lot since starting the program.
Is your sister a doctor, or is she in medicine at all, that she was so encouraging of you?
No. So growing up, it was always my sister's dream to be the doctor in our family. So she actually did attempt to do medicine and go through GAMSAT. It's a very tough exam, and I think, particularly I'd be the same as her. If I'd done it straight out of school, I would not have made it either. And I think luckily for her, she didn't. She's found a life in finance and in corporate, and she's absolutely excelling and loving it there. But she'd sat the GAMSAT. She's very much a type A personality, so she'd spreadsheeted options and done all that for herself. So when I sort of started asking questions, she had a lot of it there ready to go.
It's interesting that you talk about having a game plan, or that your sister had set up a game plan for you. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you approach the GAMSAT?
So I was finishing my undergrad, I was working, so I knew that I was going to be time poor. But fortunately, with my job, I was in a position where I did have a little bit of spare income. So I actually had a look around, and I found a few of sort of those GAMSAT ready programs. I found one I liked, which turned out to be grad ready, and I didn't go to the extent of getting a tutor or anything like that, but it's just a package where all the information that would be required for the GAMSAT was all in one spot for me. I didn't have to go looking for it or trying to work out what they were going to ask. And especially for myself, like I didn't do chemistry or physics or anything like that at high school. I was a chippy, I didn't need to. So
yeah, of course.
That really helped. And the first time I sat the GAMSAT, it was quite early. I'd only been studying the material for about a month or so, but a big piece of advice that my sister gave to me was to sit the exam. And this was back when you did the whole exam in one sitting, to really get an idea of the time, the flow, and just how to maintain your energy throughout the day, which was a fantastic idea. But then the second time I sat it, they'd changed it. They'd pulled the middle section out and done that separately via ProctorU. So it was a bit different.
And tell me, what tips do you have for the application or selection process?
One thing that really jumped out at me when my sister did pull up all her spreadsheets was that the GAMSAT score is not everything. I did all right. I didn't do fantastically. It took me 2 turns to get through. But you look at some people who had amazing GAMSAT scores and their interviews were very subpar, and they lost out on positions because of that. I cast quite a wide net. I put in my options with GEMSAS and then applied for a few unis. outside of that, one of which, of course, was the School of Rural Health in Dubbo with Sydney Uni, which I didn't even know existed until my sister pulled it up and waved a bit of paper in front of my face and said, this will be a really good option. And so I put that on the paper. But I think, don't neglect the interview, but also, interviewing is one of those skills where it's a fine line between being rehearsed and just being yourself in the interview as well.
How did you approach the interview?
I didn't really do much practice. I'm fortunate enough, so I'm 35 this year, so I've got a little bit of life experience behind me, which I found definitely did help. It is one of the benefits coming in as a postgraduate. I've worked other jobs. I've moved around the country, so classic one they ask is, when's a time in your life you've faced a challenge? You can answer that quite easily and quite honestly. But I think if you know the motivation for why you want to get into medicine, you'll be able to answer those questions quite easily and quite honestly. And the people on the other side of the screen also can tell whether you're rehearsing a speech or whether you're speaking from the heart.
Tell me a bit about the rural aspect of it. I mean, you lived a rural life, but were you always going to take the rural pathway?
Yeah, absolutely. I really had no compunction to ever study in a metropolitan centre. I've lived rurally all my life, and my parents also grew up in very rural areas as well. In fact, it's one of the things that my grandmother said to me: if you do get in and you become a doctor, promise me that you'll be a rural doctor and be a doctor for the people out there who need it, which of course was a huge inspiration for myself. But every program that I applied to, it was all the rural pathways. So Wollongong University as well as the end-to-end rural pathway, obviously School of Rural Health, Melbourne University's rural pathway as well, and same with Flinders. So my target was the rural side of things, and that's where my heart lies as well. Medicine out here in the country, where it's very much a lacking resource, and it's one of the things that sort of drove me to do it in the first place.
What kind of conversations were you having with your wife about career and opportunities for her in Dubbo before you moved?
I suppose we'd had a few conversations about what life looked like at all of the locations. I wasn't actually expecting to get any positions at any unis, and I actually ended up being accepted into all 4 that I applied for.
That's incredible.
But it came down between Dubbo and the University of Wollongong, doing it in Mossvale. My wife, having just graduated as a vet, was a big part in that. Like, she's an absolute angel. I've dragged her across the country for the past 5 or so years.
Yeah, you have.
and this is just one more. So the promise is that next time when I get through med school and move for internship, she gets to pick where we go. We thought that Dubbo, for her part particularly, was a great opportunity for a young vet getting into the industry. There's agriculture out here. There's obviously people with pets, but it's also the quality of where you work as well. So she was pretty happy with Dubbo, and of course our lifestyle, we've got 2 dogs, 3 cats and all the animals, so we need that bit of space as well.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the lifestyle in Dubbo outside of study. What do you get up to? What's out there to partake of, and how do you enjoy your life there?
You got to love running if you come to Dubbo. Everyone runs. It's a park run's got 300 or 400 people every Saturday that it runs. It's an institution. But Dubbo's a great town. It's a town that really tries hard. There's usually a lot on, so always a lot of little gigs. Of course, having the zoo out here is great as well. It's for when friends and family visit. But it's a great community as well. There's a lot of sports, a lot of activities to get involved in. And it's one of my things that I very much wanted to be involved in, the fire brigade, SES type stuff. And I actually managed to, through the help of a fellow med student, make my way into the Volunteer Rescue Association here in Dubbo. So there's about 6 or 7 medical students in it now, which is absolutely fantastic. So Daniel Weber did an amazing job recruiting us all into that. But once again, it's that really beautiful sort of team environment, and you just get to know everyone in the town, which is just wonderful.
Talk a little bit about the training in Dubbo. What's the clinical side been like?
The clinical side has just been fantastic. And honestly, it's one of the main reasons I picked Dubbo. When I was looking through all the universities, they very much had the very standard design of, you do mainly 18 months of theory with a few little clinical placements here and there. And then the years 3 and years 4, you get a bit more clinical immersion. What really stood out with the School of Rural Health is that from year 1, we were spending time in the hospital with senior clinicians and doing bedside tutorials with them. So even from the very first year, we were doing a lot of the theory, but we're also getting that little bit of backing of clinical relevance and seeing how it all ties together, which for someone like myself who is very much a hands-on learner, that was just fantastic. And of course, then you get to know a lot of the physicians and nursing staff that work in the hospital, and you get to know them when you go out to run club or park run or something as well. But it makes it a much more supportive environment. You really feel like you can ask questions. And, second year, we're spending a bit more time in the hospital, and obviously third year, we'll be in there a lot more. And it just makes it a little bit more comfortable when we have a bit of a relationship with the physicians, with the medical staff, and we feel comfortable to, step in and help out where we can.
Mm. Does a smaller town kind of help you manage your time better with such a heavy workload? Are you able to kind of find a balance between study and life?
To the extent that any medical student can, maybe. There's definitely a thing of too much study in medical school, and there's obviously very much a thing of not enough, and it's finding that balance in between. I think the biggest flex of being in Dubbo is my commute to the university is about 6 minutes, and I live on the other side of town to the uni. So I can duck home for lunch if I want, or if I wake up a bit late, if I've had a big night out up studying, then, I can wake up a bit late and roll straight into a lecture, and it's not too much of an issue. I don't have to spend an hour and a half on the train to get there.
Huge flex. Yeah, it's great. Speaking of study, do you have a particular mode of studying? There's a plethora. Have you found one that works for you better than others?
I think it changes as you progress through med school, as you get a little bit more clinical. But first year is definitely Anki cards and osmosis videos were the best way to do it. So just flashcards with that spaced repetition, I found really helped with a lot of the physiological and pathophysiological processes, and just really getting those to stick in the memory. Same with a lot of the medications as well. And then, osmosis was a great tool to simplify some of those really big complex pathologies and make it a little bit more digestible in the initial sense. Since moving on to second year, I still do my Ankies, but that's just a force of habit, and I think it still helps. But it just comes down to clinical cases, clinical questions. So I suppose products like eMedici are great because you can just get a heap of questions, multiple choice questions, which are similar to our exams, and just really build that clinical reasoning.
A lot of people talk about imposter syndrome. You got accepted into all 4 unis and you didn't think you would, et cetera, et cetera. Is it something that you felt deeply, that you felt personally? And if so, how are you managing it now, and are you in a good place with it?
I'd say I'm in as good a place as any with it. I'm still expecting to get a call from the university any day going, we made a mistake. There's some with the same initials and birthday, and we've gave you their spot. You're the wrong person. Get out.
So you haven't dealt with it.
I heard a surgeon saying that the other day, so I'm pretty sure that's about the standard moving forward. But I definitely experienced it doing pre-hospital work. You show up to a few incidents and you're very much comfortable, but things can start getting out of hand really quickly. And all of a sudden you feel really out of your depth. And particularly in a rural setting, sometimes you're the only person there to manage that. And that's when it really does come on strong after that is, did I do the right things? Did I have the right approach? But I think my way of dealing with it is just making sure that I'm really rock solid on my fundamentals of medicine. Something like a primary survey, which, is one of the arguably more important parts of acute care. And just knowing that if you can do the basics well, that you're acting to your level, then, you can, I suppose, mitigate a bit of that imposter syndrome. But also what helps as well is putting your hand up when you really do feel out of your depth and feel like, no, I'm off the track, I'm doing the wrong thing, I shouldn't be here. Asking a clinical supervisor, is this the right thing to do? Am I on the right track? And often a chat with them will really help to sort of alleviate a bit of that as well. And you realise where your expected knowledge is supposed to be.
I know that studying rurally and, working rurally later on is an absolute goal for you. Do you feel like you might be missing out educationally by not spending time in a metro hospital?
I think in some instances, a good example is at the moment where we're doing endocrinology and neurology. Dubbo's got one fantastic neurologist and 1 or 2 endocrinologists out here, but we don't have that plethora of specialists that you'd get in a metropolitan area. So I suppose in that sense, you can feel like you're missing out. But if you then weigh it up with what we sort of see in a rural setting in more acute medicine, we see a lot more progressed disease, advanced cases, and as students, we get to be a little bit more hands-on as well and be a little bit more involved. So I think it very much equals out, and I'm still very happy with my decision.
What is one piece of advice that you wish you were given before starting your medical journey?
I struggled a lot in my first year balancing my finances, my physical fitness, my diet, work, study, all of those things, to the point where I was really struggling about 2/3 of the way through the year. But my learning supervisor, who's a fantastic ED physician, made a very good point that, when you are working in medicine, not everything can be a priority. You've got to pick a few things that are the priority at that time, and it's okay to let some of the others slip. So, my house isn't as clean as I'd like it. It bothers me, but, say at the moment I've got an exam tomorrow, so my priority is studying. And I know that after the exams I can go nuts, clean the house, go for a run, do all that stuff. But for now, I'm content in knowing that I just need to study, get this exam done, get a good result, and then I can focus on the other stuff until I'm back at uni again.
I'm honoured that you're taking the time to speak with me, Lockie, the day before your exam. I know these are precious, precious minutes and hours before a big exam. And then following on from that, what is it about medicine that you think you just could never, ever have prepared for?
I think it's the same thing that got me into medicine. It's the human element of it. You unfortunately see some of the harder parts of life when you get into medicine. You see some pretty distressing situations. I'm fortunate I've seen a few things in pre-hospital care, but there's still some other stuff that I've never come across, and you never know how you as a person are going to react to that, what the effect on you will be. So I suppose the tricky part is just always being aware of yourself and others, and it might be something you've seen 100 times. A fellow student, it might be their first time seeing it. So it's just looking out for each other and just making sure that, everyone's coping and you're not sort of, I suppose, thinking everyone thinks the same way as yourself.
Lachlan MacMillan, second-year medical student, University of Sydney Medical Program, School of Rural Health, Dubbo. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening. Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.